All right. You outlined the upgrade with Spencer Rattler. That's pretty obvious. Um, it almost underlines the job that Shane Beamer did last year. Who in the world starts four different quarterbacks each 3 games, still pulls out a 7-6 season, beats the likes of Auburn and Florida down the stretch, and then North Carolina and Sam Howell in a bowl game? And I watched that game every play, and just, yeah, there are all sorts of guys coming in and out. I think your starter hadn't played at quarterback in like 3 years. It was just crazy. I don't want to anoint Shane Beamer, but at the same time, my goodness, he's off to a great start. When did you get a feeling that he might be the answer?
I loved the hire from the second it happened. And I just felt like, when it first went down, right? I was not a Will Muschamp guy, to say the least, Mark. One of my big breakthroughs in business, and I feel like, as a content creator, that you have certain moments, certain clips, certain things that happen that sort of put you on the map, if you will. If you did not know, after the UNC game, and this just shows how life comes full circle, after the North Carolina game in 2019, I was probably the first one of the loudest voices, one of the first loud voices to go on record and say, fire Will Muschamp. I didn't think he was the guy. It just showed to me after you got embarrassed in the bowl game in 2018 against Virginia in the same building, and you had 7 months to get ready for the North Carolina game, and you had all these veteran players, and you felt like it was going to be a bounce-back season, to not be more prepared than you were. I just felt like, and then you factored in what he did at Florida. I was on the fire Muschamp train. I just did not think he was the answer, did not think he was the guy. Now, fast forward to 2020, he gets relieved of his duties, and you start going through the coaching search, and you heard the typical names, the Billy Napiers, the Hugh Freezes, the Joe Bradys, if you will. And I loved the hire from the jump because, as I told you, Mark, before, I've had a great opportunity to chat with so many former players, some of the greatest Gamecocks to put on the uniform, and to hear their perspectives on Shane Beamer. And it felt like South kind of just needed to roll the dice, to make an out-of-the-box hire, because South Carolina is not a typical job. Mark, it's a very tough job. It's very tough to win here. There are challenges unlike any other SEC school. Now, that's not to say South Carolina doesn't have the resources, a fantastic fan base, a beautiful campus. You're in the best conference in college football. They have everything they need, but the challenges to win and win at a high level are there. So I was a believer in Shane from the jump, and I really felt like, Mark, from the beginning, that this is not going to be a 1 or 2 year thing. This is going to be over the course of 5, 6, 7 years, allowing Shane Beamer to learn on the fly as a head coach, to recruit, to build a roster. And what he did in year one, and I said this, Mark, the real test last offseason, or last preseason, I said the biggest challenge and the thing I'm most looking forward to is, it's easy in the honeymoon phase to have all that positivity and positive momentum and to be cheerful and to be happy. But when you fumble the football and you throw an interception, and more importantly, you lose a game, when you run into adversity, can Shane Beamer continue to be that guy? Can he continue to inject positive momentum and positive energy? And that was the thing that probably impressed me the most. South Carolina got punched in the face multiple times last season. I mean, you think of the Georgia game, you think if you had to beat East Carolina by a last-second field goal, you beat Vanderbilt by 1 point. Thank goodness for Zeb Nolan, a game you probably should have lost. I mean, you look at the Texas A&M game where you got really embarrassed, and it never wavered. Shane Beamer was the same guy. He continued to be that same positive voice, that same positive force. And I think that's why you saw at the end of the season, this team continue to believe, continue to fight for their head coach. That's why you beat Florida the way you did. That's why you beat Auburn, and you're able to navigate to a bowl game. So listen, is Shane Beamer, and I said this when he was hired, is Shane Beamer the guy to get South Carolina to a national championship or even win the SEC? I don't know, right, Mark? There's a lot of factors that go into winning a championship. The ball's got to bounce your way. Hey, no coach has ever been a great coach without great players. You got to go get great players. Players are the ones that win the game. But I will say this, I feel confident that if nothing else, Shane Beamer is going to leave South Carolina football in a much better place than he found it. And that may not sound like a lot, but in today's day and age where coaches are just leaving left and right, I think that is saying a lot for South Carolina football. And he was the guy they absolutely needed, because when the Muschamp era went down, this was a fan base and a program that needed a proverbial hug, if you will. I mean, that's really how it felt. So I think Beamer's the perfect fit for South Carolina. Again, he's a guy that was on the staff when the Gamecocks went to the SEC championship in 2010. He's seen South Carolina football at its best, and he knows what it takes to get it there. Again, what is the ceiling as him as head coach? I don't know. Only time will tell, but I feel very confident in him as head coach, what he's doing. Again, all that positive energy, positive momentum. And now, you win some games. And now, of course, that momentum and hype is sky high right now. And I think that's the reason, you're seeing guys like Spencer Rattler and Austin Stogner and Christian Beal-Smith and Antoine Wells and Terrell Dawkins, Devontae Reed, and all these guys in the transfer portal and all these freshmen they recruited that look at South Carolina and say, you know what, I want to play for that guy. They want to go where it's fun. They want to go where the winning is. And South Carolina is getting closer and closer to that point. So, again, to answer your question, I'm very confident with Beamer. And it was very evident to me early on in just the way that he carried himself and navigated this team, not through the highs, but for me, it was through the lows and through the adversities, him continuing to be the same guy with that infectious energy and momentum. That was the thing that really stood out to me. And again, I feel very confident about him as head coach moving forward. And I joke with people, Mark, that I wouldn't put his name on a T-shirt if I didn't believe in him. I can tell you that much. So
that's the ultimate sales point right there. If you're going to wear the billboard around all the time, you got to believe in the man.
Right. Exactly.
Well, you made the statement, Chris, that you got to go get the players. Mm-hmm. Well, there's the good and the bad of being in South Carolina and playing in the SEC. The good is that the Deep South produces the best football players in the country. All right. In addition to that, though, you've got everybody in your backyard like Clemson, Georgia, et cetera, fighting for those players. And Will Muschamp, he brought in classes in the top 15 to 25 in the country, but you can be number 20 in the country in recruiting, but you're going to be number 9 or 10 in the SEC. Mm-hmm. And you know what the deal is there. Is there any indication that Shane Beamer is giving you hope that the recruiting is going to be better than it was?
Well, I think the hope really stems from what he did in his last stint when he was here. And again, I know Steve Spurrier was the head coach, and certainly that helped. But Shane Beamer assisted in recruiting some of the best players that have ever worn the garnet and black. So he proved in that first stint, in my opinion, that he can do it. To your point, Mark, and Gamecock fans don't want to hear this, but just call it for what it is. I mean, has it ever been harder to win at South Carolina than it is right now? When you factor in the run that Clemson's on, I mean, they had a bad season last year and won 10 games. Georgia just won the national championship. I mean, those are your two closest rivals, and you could argue they're in the midst of the greatest runs they've ever had in football in school history. So certainly it's not an easy task right now, what you're asking Shane Beamer to do. But, Mark, I've said this over and over and over, and certainly I do believe to compete for national titles. You know, fans love to say, it's funny, the fans of teams that don't recruit well are the ones that say stars don't mean anything, right? If you pull in a top 5 class, then stars mean everything to you, right? You're just going to lean on the stars. But at South Carolina, until I think you get to a point where you're averaging 8 to 9 wins per year, because the best players in the country, they want to go where the winning is. They want to compete for titles. They want to get a ring. They want to go where they're going to get drafted. And guess what? The scouts pay more attention to teams that are winning and are in primetime games and are playing for championships. Let's just call that for what it is. At South Carolina, Mark, I think right now what you have to be is a master talent evaluator and a master talent developer. Because to your point, the previous coach and previous regime, it's not like they brought in duds. They brought in talent. They couldn't develop them. Guys got on campus, and for whatever reason, it didn't feel like they got the most out of them. And you can see that right now. I mean, you see South Carolina with guys in the NFL from the Javon Kinlaws, the Debo Samuels, to the Hayden Hurst. I mean, on one team, South Carolina had Debo Samuel, Brian Edwards, Shi Smith, Hayden Hurst, Rico Dowdle, who at running back, who's in the NFL, and they still couldn't get it done offensively. Well, why is that? Again, the development was just not there. So, you know, it's one of those things. I don't know if you've ever seen Moneyball, Mark, but when Billy Beane is talking about we are card counters at the blackjack table, I kind of look at South Carolina that way. And I'm not sitting here saying we can't go out and get 5-star players. You know, again, I think the biggest plus of adding a guy like Spencer Rattler, if you can show you can develop him and he can have a good season and he can go in the NFL draft, I think that opens the door up to more big-time quarterbacks looking at South Carolina and changing the stigma around that position. Because I don't know if you knew this, Mark, South Carolina has not had a quarterback selected in the NFL draft since 1989. It's been a very long time, Mark. So if you can change the narrative of that position, because, again, if you don't have a big-time QB, you just simply don't really have a chance to compete week in, week out in the SEC. You can change that narrative. I think that helps you out tremendously. And again, I think as South Carolina continues to win games and get better and improve, you know, they're going to attract more big-time talent. Again, it's never going to not be a challenge with Clemson, Georgia all around you, the SEC. Because like you mentioned, I mean, South Carolina finished like 22nd in recruiting, but they're like 12th in the SEC. I mean, it's insanity how good the league is. But I do feel confident they can get the job done. Again, as long as you're pulling in my opinion, top 25 classes, and you're finding those guys that fit what you're building. You look at some of the greatest Gamecocks in school history. The one that jumps out, DJ Swearinger, was a 3-star player, turned out to be an All-American caliber defensive back. You look at Melvin Ingram, 3-star player, turned out to be one of the best D linemen in school history. Of course, obviously, you need to land those 5 stars every now and then. But again, right now, master talent evaluator, that's exactly what they did under Steve Spurrier. You look at his classes, they were never really, I mean, they had the one class, they ranked 7th in 2007. Outside of that, they sat 20th to 25th, but they got the absolute most out of the talent they got on campus. So I think right now, that's what you have to do. And I think the more you win, I think the easier it becomes to get more top elite talent to consider coming to Columbia.
Chris Phillips, the Spurs Up Show, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Stitch. That's for the Daily Crow. That's every day at noon, right? Monday through Friday.
Noon to 2. Yep, noon to 2. And then the podcast drops Monday, Wednesday, Friday on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, just wherever you find podcasts, it'll be there. So
phenomenal. Chris, come on back and talk some more football with us sometime.
Anytime, Mark. I love it. Anytime.